Hello, everyone. How is everyone? Welcome to the day 8, beginning of week 2 talk for the 21-day My Master Health Challenge. It's great to be with you again. We're doing great once again, tracking through on Facebook, and we're right on schedule. I've been pleased with some of the comments, some of the questions. We're right on track, right where we expect to be. And today, if you got to the challenge today, the day 8 challenge, you did one of my favorite challenges actually, and that is observing the stars of your inner world. And I like this challenge because it broadens the idea of what your internal dialogue is. So you know by now that your internal dialogue is really driving your experience of life, and it's dictating how much stress you're experiencing, right? And so, one easy way to get confused about the idea of the inner dialogue is to think of it just as conversation, just as dialogue going on in your head. But in fact, inner dialogue refers to a much broader idea than just language, right? Inner dialogue includes the thoughts that arise, right? Also includes the emotions that occur that get triggered because of thoughts. And as you saw today, inner dialogue also includes ideas like people that populate your inner world and the stories that you have stored inside your memory that get provoked when you think of people arising in your inner world. And so, really, for that reason, we use the concept that is going to be central to the talk today, which is emotional visualization. And I'll go into that in much more detail in a moment here. But if you did the reading over the weekend, you got thoroughly introduced to what emotional visualization is. So, one way, and I think the simplest way to think about and understand emotional visualization, is to recognize that your internal dialogue, the conversation going inside your head 24/7, is driving your emotional visualization process or your emotional visualization system. And emotional visualization is a vital aspect of your inner world because whatever you are visualizing emotionally, and that means this inner dialogue is producing all of these consequences, right? Emotions, stories, a narrative, imagination, what goes on visually that you could sort of visually see in your mind. So all those the inner dialogue produces and turns into an emotional visualization. And that emotional visualization is what is determining your level of stress in any given moment. And if you did the reading this weekend on day 1, you learned the really fundamental role that stress plays in your health. And stress in your inner world, you learned, can shorten lifespan of cells, and mitigating stress or managing stress effectively actually has the reverse effect. We've seen research that has demonstrated that reducing stress inside your inner world strategically actually has the effect of lengthening the life of cells. And of course, you understand that cells make up your vital organs, and you need the long life of cells and the healthy replication of cells for the long life of your organs. And so the steps that you're taking throughout the course of your 21-day health challenge are actually having the effect, if you're doing it correctly and sequentially and consistently and strategically, they're having the effect of healing any past damage that was done to your cells. So you learned about this incredible groundbreaking and Nobel Prize winning research done by the Blackburn Lab. Elizabeth Blackburn over at UCSF right here in San Francisco did research on telemers. And telemers, you can think of, these are, I think of them as the little plastic pieces that are on the end of shoelaces, right? So they hold the shoelace together so it doesn't unravel. In the same way, a telemer holds on at the end of chromosomes, and it ensures that the integrity of that chromosome. So when stress occurs in your inner world and it degrades the length and the strength and structure of these telomeres, it puts the cell in danger. And so as that telomere shortens, the length of the cell's expected life expectancy also shortens. And that's what this research that the Blackburn lab did discovered. And so when you understand that, you recognize that when you experience stress in your life and it's not adequately dealt with, you don't have strategies in place, which you're learning throughout your 21 days to cope effectively with that stress, then your telomeres shorten and the health of your cells is in danger. And so that's one really practical and research-based reason why every day throughout the course of your 21 days you are doing these mind exercises. You're observing what's going on in your inner world. You're noticing what arises. And as we move now into week 2, you're going to be looking out for even more specific things. And the specific things actually beginning tomorrow will be noticing trigger events, these sort of emotional events that drag you out of your emotional comfort zone. And the reason for that is when you get pulled out of your emotional comfort zone, that is your emotional trigger that stress is going on in your body. And so you want to get really good at noticing those moments when you have been pulled out of your emotional comfort zone. And as we move forward today in the talk, I'm going to give you a couple, actually 2.5 strategies. I'd say 3 strategies, but I'll just touch on the third one. Strategies for mitigating these moments when you get pulled out of your emotional comfort zone, when stress starts to creep in to your inner world, stress starts to creep into your inner dialogue. So I'm going to give you strategies, 2 strategies for mitigating that, and then to touch on a third one, which really you'll get a lot more practice at beginning in the 3rd week of your health challenge, because you need to do a little bit more inner world work, inner world exploration before you can really effectively apply that 3rd strategy. So, today's going to go similar to last week. I'll go, I'm sure, a shorter period of time, somewhere between a half hour and an hour. If you have any questions, please post them inside the Facebook group as I go. I'll take a break in a minute here and take a look and see if anything's been posted and then address any questions that come up. But I have a number of things that I want to get through today, but I want to begin by going over some of the things that have been achieved so far. Now, I just talked about for a few minutes a massive achievement. You're actually the steps that you're taking every day by going through your mind exercise and doing your daily ritual are actually having the effect of lengthening the lifespan of your cells, right? You're learning how to mitigate stress in your inner world. And you've learned about emotional visualization and how that process ties right into the amount of stress that you're going to be experiencing. This week, beginning today, you saw in the download the daily exercise that's going to be added to your daily ritual each day. So depending on what your particular health goal is, you're going to do a different amount of exercise. If you want to lose weight, eventually you're going to have to get into doing more exercise, burning more calories. But as a minimum, for everybody who's going through the challenge right now, we're going to be adding 20 minutes of exercise per day. And you can choose what you want to be doing for that exercise. So it's the first 20 minutes is exercise of your choice. Could be jogging, could be yoga, anything that really gets your heart rate going. And then after you're done with your 20 minutes, ideally what I'd like you to be doing is walking. So you're done with, for example, 20 minutes of jogging, then I want you to be walking while you complete the mind exercise. And so the mind exercise you've now done, you've been doing for the last few days. And it's that sequence of observing, listening to the sounds in the outer world, and then noticing your breath, this conduit between the outer world and the inner world, and then going inside. And this is, of course, after you begin by noticing the sensations, tracking that around your body, and then you go into your inner world and you begin to notice the thoughts that arise on the bridge of translation, which you've now learned about. And so you're going to be doing the full sequence of that, which will take you 15 to 20 minutes a day after you do your exercise. So we're really stepping it up here. And I want to encourage you as we go into week 2, this is when the going can get a little bit tough. At the beginning, it's all new and it's exciting and it's a lot easier to be motivated. But as time goes on, this is when a lot of people start to fall off. And so this is when I want to give you a little bit of pep talk and encourage you that this is the time to really dig in those moments in the morning when maybe you feel like you don't feel like getting up. And actually, let's tie that idea in right now. So I talked a minute ago about moving out of your emotional comfort zone. So what's that thought you have the first thing in the morning when you have this feeling like, oh, I knew I planned to get up and do my mind exercise, do my day of my master challenge, and I don't feel like it? Well, that moment, that feeling that arises right first thing of the day, if you have it, is an example of one of these key moments, these moments that arise in your inner world and shift you into a uncomfortable emotional place, shift you out of your comfort zone emotionally. So we want to be really clear noticing those moments. And in the case of first thing in the morning, in the case of I don't feel like getting out of bed and doing my mind master challenge, let's prepare right now. Expect that that's going to be coming up. Another thing that I want you to be adding, I think this is a great strategy for adding to get really good at noticing right from the beginning of your day what's going on in your inner world, is before you even wake up, before you even open your eyes, but right as you're waking up, you're going to notice that on autopilot every day, right on cue, will be your first thought of the day. And if you can get really good at noticing what that first thought of the day is for you, this is going to be extremely helpful for becoming more consistently aware of and in touch with the content of your inner dialogue. So start first thing in the morning, first thought of the day, and you'll notice if you do that, that of course you don't just have that first thought. That first thought triggers the second thought and the third thought, and you're now into a sequence of dialogue. And as you do this day after day, you'll notice a couple things. Number one, your first thought of the day is automatic, right? It's been programmed by past days of first thoughts. So this is an unconscious autopilot. And the more that you notice, the more that you bring awareness and attention to what that first thought is, you'll notice that it changes in the future. But at the beginning, it is always going to be based on your history. So it's just unconsciously generated. You notice that first thought. And what you will also notice is that first thought is, I like to say, it's repetitive. It's also contagious. So whatever that first thought is influences what the second thought is and influences the third thought. And this is the string of thoughts that begins your day that determines how your energy proceeds. Do you go into a negative energy saying, I don't want to get out of bed, there's nothing good out there for me? Or do you say, oh, I can't wait for what's coming today, or I'm looking forward to breakfast, or whatever it is that brings some energy into your body? And this is one way to think about this that keeps me inspired on a regular basis whenever I come to that moment of the day, is that you are engaging the 100 billion neurons inside your brain in each moment that you're noticing the thoughts going on. And if you can be aware in those moments of the vast and enormous, immense power that resides inside your brain with all of these brain cells, all these neurons, and you recognize that by moving the flow of thinking, the flow of conversation, of internal dialogue, the flow of energy that moves through your brain in a strategic and intentional way, you are literally changing the future of your life. Not only specifically the next 5 minutes of your day, which are either going to be infused with a positive energy that moves you in the right direction, and then, as I said, is repetitive and contagious, so is likely to continue to move you in whatever direction you move in, but you're also reprogramming yourself by taking that step so that tomorrow and the next day and next week, especially if you do this consistently, you're going to be producing a very different future of internal dialogue. And as I'm going to get into right now, this internal dialogue that flows off your bridge of translation, that constitutes your emotional visualization process, is what I refer to as your self each moment, right? So conversation comes onto your bridge from your inner world, one side of your bridge of translation, and whatever's coming in from the outer world is also coming to the other side of the bridge. They meet in the middle, and off the bridge flows this 24/7 internal dialogue. That internal dialogue produces yourself, and we write that in capital letters in the Mind Master Silent Journey, and as you go through the program here, you'll notice self in capital letters refers to the content, the changing, always ever-changing content of your inner dialogue. And so the reason I really like to think of it in that way, and I love that metaphor, is because that illustrates to you that your self changes, is very changeable, pliable structure inside your inner world, and it changes based on the content of your inner dialogue. So every time you're able to produce different inner dialogue, you're producing a new version of yourself. And as we move forward into the end of week 2, and then into your weekend especially, and then into week 3, you're going to be seeing that you produce very different versions of yourself depending on what internal dialogue you're producing. That's why it's so vital to be aware of what is going on in your internal dialogue. The way that you eventually are going to be able to consistently program yourself to achieve your health goal is when you can produce what we call your best self, the best version of yourself. And that's a version of yourself that is perfectly aligned with the health goal that you choose. Now, the alternative possibility is that you're producing what we call a self-defeating cycle. So, and that is a self that moves you away from the habits that are necessary to follow through with moving towards your health goal. And so you see just by that little metaphor there that you can produce a self-defeating cycle or you can produce a best self. Both of those are produced by the internal dialogue coming off your bridge, and both of those are very different versions of yourself. Not until you get in awareness of and in directorship of, control of this internal dialogue, can you reliably produce the version of yourself that you want to produce, right? And so that moves us into the other aspect. You have the self, and we talked about, Leo asked about this in Facebook last week. You have the self, which is the ongoing internal dialogue, what that's producing. And then you have what I call you, another capital letter word, Y-O-U. And you is simply your capacity to observe and to place your attention where you choose to place it. So when you can observe your inner dialogue, yourself, with enough space between you and yourself so that you doesn't get pulled into yourself, then you're able to direct that attention in a strategic way so that you make the changes to yourself that you want. And then in the future, yourself will habitually produce that inner dialogue and habitually produce that new self. And so this is really the master skill of moving through your 21-day program. It is to first be aware of the difference between you, which is your attention, and yourself, which is the dialogue going on inside you. First, you want to become aware of that distinction, and then you want to get masterful at maintaining the space so that you and yourself do not become fused together, right? When you and yourself become fused together inside your inner world, which notably is the standard modus operandi, mode of operating for most people, right? You and yourself feel like the same thing throughout the day, right? You get dragged around by the story of yourself. You're so engaged in what the outer world is pulling you into that you have not become aware of and maintained that space between you and yourself and your inner world. And the danger of that, if you have old bad habits, old bad patterns of emotion that provoke behavior, then that has the effect of sabotaging your health related goal. And so that's the reason why we need to get this space identified and then put in place strategies to maintain it, right? And so I told you earlier in this talk that I was going to be giving you a couple different strategies. And so This is, and I'll get into that in a moment here. What I wanted to go into a little bit first, after describing those definitions to you, is the real benefits of being able to maintain that space, right? When you can maintain the space between yourself and you can observe, then when that moment comes, like the moment I was talking about the first thing in the morning, or perhaps during your day when you get a little stressed out at work, and rather than becoming stressed and having that devolve into a bad habit like reaching for food, you notice that moment of stress, which is marked by an emotion inside your body. And if you can notice that right at the beginning, then you can apply strategies to change it. And when you do that, every single time you do that, you're retraining your brain, you're retraining your inner world to produce a different result next time. The trick here, of course, is that this takes consistency, and it takes repetition, and it takes, therefore, being able to notice on an ongoing, consistent basis for a while when you're getting provoked emotionally, when you're moving out of your emotional comfort zone. And that's why you have daily rituals and daily strategies to make sure that you're going through the steps that are going to allow you to do that noticing on a consistent basis. Okay? So, let's see here. We want to maintain that space between yourself and you. And when you don't do that, if you... I posted earlier today in the Facebook group, and you may have gotten a chance to look at it. We'll go over it in a minute here. But this is the consequence of what I call the control trap that I'm going to talk to you about. So this is your mistaken self comes up when you don't notice that emotion arising, that negative emotion, and don't take steps to shift out of that negative emotion back to your best self, right? What happens is you get caught in the control trap. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the control trap. It actually relates to what a couple people have commented in the Facebook group. These just getting overwhelmed by emotions when you are initially, the first couple days, observing your inner dialogue. It really can, it's a new process. It's a new technique. It's a new experience for most people. And so it can drag you around, and you're all of a sudden asking yourself to notice in a very present way what's going on in your inner life, what's going on with your emotions. So this is new. So it's to be expected that for the first few days, the first week, it can throw you off. As you do it more and more, you're going to build up a tolerance. You're going to not be as disturbed by things that arise because you'll have noticed them before, and you will also have some strategies that you can apply to move out of them. Historically, we fall into the control trap. And the control trap, it has a history, right? So last week, Leo asked about the self, the history of the self, right? So this is the history of internal dialogue that produces our self. And over the course of history, we have developed a self that has a belief that it can control everything about our environment. And the reason for that is because as we've evolved over time, everything that has evolved about us has been about how can we live longer? What are the things biologically that can occur that give us greater control over our environment so that we feel safer and so that we actually do, in fact, live longer? One of the things that's happened is that this self, this idea inside of us that we have control over the events in the outer world, has gotten stronger and stronger to the point where we've really merged into it. We have a belief, most people have a belief, that this self is representative of everything about who you really are. When in fact, yourself is not who you are. Yourself is a strategy that has evolved in your inner world over time, and it's a strategy that evolved to help you navigate your life in a healthier way. But what has happened, particularly over the recent history, is that the self oftentimes actually gets in the way of healthy living. And that's why we have a program like the My Master Health Challenge that we have now gone so far that we need to put attention to ourselves to rein it back in so that we're not just letting it run with the habits that it has created without an awareness of separation inside your inner world that can make changes to the self. Okay? So the control trap is a trap that you fall into when your self has this implicit inherent belief that it can control anything that happens in the world. And so rather than being able to step back and observe what's going on in the inner world and be able to make changes to it, you just go along with old bad habits, right? And so you gets merged into yourself and old bad habits progress. But once you come to a recognition that yourself does not in fact control the world, you can then take ownership of yourself so that you can put yourself into strategic use for the very specific goal that you have chosen for your health challenge. But until you recognize it as a tool, yourself as a tool to make changes to your life, to get you the things that you want in your life, you're in danger of falling into the control trap. Okay, so let me give you a real world sort of specific example of this before I go into those 3 strategies that can really interact effectively with yourself when yourself does pull you in to the story of your life, to some old repetitive historical story that you become identified with in your mind, but as we're talking about today, is not actually you. It's a version of you that comes up from time to time. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but I was so touched and inspired and motivated the first time that I heard this story about the Dalai Lama. So every Dalai Lama is discovered in the Tibetan tradition, right? And so what I call the Dalai Lama is the master emotional visualizer, right? And that's because this, for example, current 14th Dalai Lama was discovered as a 2-year-old boy. And it was at that point that he began his training with his master teachers in what you're doing every day now, in emotional visualization, in becoming intimately aware of what is arising in real time in his inner world. What are the thoughts that are arising? What are the emotions that are arising? And what story does that produce? And how does that story align with his goals? And one of the beauties of the Dalai Lama is that his goals in his life are very clear to him. He wants to have love for all being. He wants to have love for himself. And so when you have such a clear mandate to yourself, then when you're observing, when you become a master at observing your inner world, it becomes extremely evident to you in real time, 24/7, once you've become a master, when you've fallen out of alignment with that emotional wish, the wish to be a loving being, have love for all others, have love for yourself. And so I actually wrote a little bit of segment that I want to read to you in the Mind Master's Silent Journey about the Dalai Lama that I felt was really inspiring and will paint a picture for you of what you're doing in a very real, practical, and strategic way as you move through your 21 days, and then after you're done with your 21 days, as you continue to practice your emotional visualization, and as you continue to evoke your best self into your inner world. And also as you continue to evolve in who you define your best self as, right? Because during your 21-day challenge, you're defining your best self as the self that achieves your personal health-related goal. And once you've achieved that goal, and once it's become habitual to achieve that goal, you may well want to redefine your best self. You want to reinvent yourself to achieve something else. Maybe you want to prosper at work, or maybe you want to prosper in relationships, or in your love life, in your family life. You'll now have the strategies, tools, knowledge, and techniques, meaning the daily ritual that you'll do and the exercise, this whole sort of sequence that you're building into your life that will enable you to choose another goal and then go about mastering it. So I'm going to read you about a page here from the Mind Master's Silent Journey, and this is about the Dalai Lama. Okay, so consider for a moment how each Dalai Lama becomes the next Dalai Lama. Beginning from 2 years old, the current Dalai Lama was training in loving meditation practices. His practice, his emotional visualization, instilled in his inner world, in his cells, and is in his silent inner dialogue a love for all beings. Over time, he developed a real-time awareness of the thoughts and the emotions that eventually became the landscape of his mind. The Dalai Lama is a master of sensing each perception, thought, emotion, and sensation as it arises onto his bridge of translation. He then tracks each non-material impulse, so those are thoughts and emotions, non-material impulses, as each solidifies into the space of his awareness, or fades from conscious attention. Through consistent attention, history's mind masters developed a seamless synergy between their thoughts and their vision of themselves. These are the anchors of their ongoing, 24/7 emotional visualization, their internal dialogue. And in turn, each mind master creates a vital opus in the form of an inner world, which then translates into an outer life, and in the case of a Dalai Lama, a timeless gift to the world that can ripple throughout the ages. Now, the development of a Dalai Lama provides us with an example of the result of dedicating your full-time attention to observing, to noticing this silent inner dialogue through unwavering loving belief of others. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about his teachers, the people when he was a 2-year-old boy and growing up as a boy, the people who taught him. How do you observe your inner world? How do you craft your emotional visualization? How do you define your best self? So this is the unwavering belief in his capacity for love, peace, and healing that was passed on to him by others. The Dalai Lama considers himself a mere mortal man, no different from you or me, but he has attended to his inner world for tens of thousands of hours of guided emotional visualization. And in the process, he's mastered attending to his self, right? The self. This is the internal dialogue flowing off his bridge. And by attending so often and intentionally, the current Dalai Lama has made himself into a beacon for the world, a jewel of humanity and the living embodiment of mastering the inner journey. The Dalai Lama's cultivated love for all beings is similar to the deepest love you may have for some other people or person in your life. So I love that. I love how that ties into the work that we do every day. Now, what has really turned me on to the work that we do in the Mind Master's Silent Journey is you see traditions like Tibetan Buddhism and the results that they've produced over millennia. And then you map that on to current brain science that has proven to us, as I talked about earlier today, that when you manage your stress in an effective way, then you are healing the damage done to your cells. And when you don't manage it in an effective way, then you are damaging yourself. You're damaging yourselves. You're shortening your lifespan, the lifespan of your cells. And you see how these old traditions that produce results like people like the Dalai Lama map perfectly on to what is the science has shown us and continues to show us is a very natural way for us to live, a way of living in free of stress, mitigating our stress, managing our stress. What the science is showing us is that mitigating stress, understanding how to have an inner dialogue in a consistent way that produces a loving internal environment is equivalent to managing your stress. So it's equivalent to living in a healthy way. And when living in a healthy way maps onto managing stress, you see what the value of choosing a health goal and mastering it is. You are not only mastering your particular health goal, but you're giving yourself a life of health, a life of healthy cells, a stress-free inner environment. So, with that, now that we talked a little bit about what happens when you don't notice things arising, you fall into that control trap. Your self absorbs you. You become just one thing. There's no separation, no capacity to observe your inner world, and you can get dragged around into old bad habits. And that may mean initially that you feel a moment of stressful emotion. And then invariably, when we're talking about a health goal, it means that you are doing something really counterproductive. You are either allowing anxiety to build up if anxiety is the health goal that you're struggling with, or you're coping with the stress by reaching for unhealthy food, or you're freezing up and failing to be able to take steps like to do your daily exercise. So when you fall into that control trap, this is the sequence of events that occurs that sabotage your health goal. So what can you do? Because we all fall into that control trap throughout the day. Inevitably, it's going to happen to you. And as you continue to go through your health challenge and continue to build these processes into your life, you're going to notice that it happens less and less. That when you have that space inside you, as that emotion begins to arise, you'll notice it and you'll make a shift to your best self before that old self has a chance to start to drag you around. In the meantime, as you're improving and getting better at that, the couple things that you can do. Strategy number one that you're going to be practicing beginning tomorrow is to just notice that emotion as it arises. And you don't always catch it right as it arises. Maybe it's been there for a few seconds before you say to yourself, oh yeah, I've lost the space, I've lost the capacity to observe, I need to back off a little bit and notice that emotion arising. And if you can just notice it and watch it without doing anything, many times just maintaining the attention of you on that emotion will dissolve it. Right? If you catch it early enough and you just manage to observe it, for example, you have that sensation, I want to grab a cigarette. And it's this stress that you feel in your chest. You feel it inside your body. When you notice that arising right in the moment that arises, and you tell yourself, this strategy, I'm just going to observe the emotion. I want to see if I stay separate from that emotion, from the inner dialogue that is perpetuating that emotion, the inner dialogue that's going to soon shift to, where are my cigarettes? Or where's my drink? Where's my bad habit? If you just instead observe the emotion, sit with it, notice whether it dissolves and you move past it, and all of a sudden that emotion is gone. And sure enough, it's going to come back up again eventually, but you will have beat it that one time. And every time you're able to do that, you are strengthening a new cell network inside your brain. And the more you do that and the stronger that network gets, the less likely the other network, this one of stress and the network that moves you towards that old bad habit, is going to get used. And the less it gets used, the weaker it gets. And the more you use the other one, the stronger it gets. And the stronger one metaphor that I love to use is the deeper that river. If you think of the neural network, the new neural network that you're creating in your brain as a river, the more water that can flow through that, the more likely the water is to push through that particular network than the other stream, the old stream, which represents the bad habit. So every time you get a small victory, you're going to notice over time that you get fewer and fewer of those emotions. And then the other thing that you notice is that when you start beating that stress just once or twice, when you get those moments of victory over it, it's empowering. You realize, gosh, I really can do this. I do have the capacity to overcome this. I don't need to continue down that old path from thought to emotion to behavior, or from emotion. Maybe the first thing you notice is emotion, and then you notice yourself taking the behavior of food or reaching for a cigarette. The more frequently that you beat that, the more you realize, gosh, I'm in complete control of this. So that's one strategy. Now, that doesn't always work, especially at the beginning when you're just learning and just beginning to practice noticing these negative emotions arise in your inner world. And so if you didn't notice and a minute went by of this story, this narrative, this stress accumulating inside your inner world, then oftentimes it's too late to just pull back and observe, because at that point there's too much inner world momentum for you to effectively pull back and just do the observation that's necessary to dissolve that emotion. And so in those cases, strategy number 2 should kick in. And strategy number 2 is to accept. Right now, I have gone past the point of no return, and I am experiencing this old negative emotion, this emotion that is representative of some form of stress. And I'm going to recognize that that's occurring in my inner world right now. And if it drags me along with it, I will have to go this time. But I will have noticed, and I will, from having noticed, I will be having an impact so that I'm more likely next time this arises to catch it earlier. Because it is the process of noticing what's occurring in your inner world that is the process of changing your inner world. And that's because every time that you notice anything that's occurring inside your brain, inside your inner world, you are providing your brain with new information that it didn't have before. And when you give your brain new positive information in the right context, such as saying, okay, I recognize that I've gone too far down the path of no return this time, and I've lost to the stress this time, you're still letting your brain know that there is the possibility of winning next time, of changing that dynamic, of changing the future of that emotion. And so by doing it, you're going to be making changes to your brain. So that's strategy number 2. You're going to start to shift the narrative of this inner movie because you're introducing this new scene. And I talk about the inner movie. You're going to get more and more familiar with this inner movie. You're going to be becoming able to actually watch in a visual way the expression of your inner dialogue. If you keep practicing, you're going to start to see that scenes, if you observe them, if you quiet yourself and go into your inner world, you can watch the scenes that your inner dialogue is narrating in each moment. So you're going to get better and better at that. And when you introduce a new scene, for example, the scene of, okay, I have missed my opportunity this time to observe my stress in real time and to shift out of it, when you can introduce that scene into the inner movie, then that scene is going to have an effect down the road. Okay, so think of it that way. Think of it as a scene that you're introducing. And then, of course, there's the third strategy. I'm going to give you half of it now, which is that when you have come to define your best self, this is the self that is perfectly aligned with your health goal, and you're going to spend a few days doing that, beginning with this weekend, Friday, and then into this coming weekend. After you've completed the real identification of all of the things that are going on in your inner world, all the different components that make up your inner dialogue. You're going to do that for the next couple days, and then come to Friday, you're going to begin to identify that best self, that best version of yourself, the self that's aligned with achieving your health goal, which maybe it's lose weight, maybe it's master your stress and anxiety, or quitting an old bad habit, or maybe it's improving a relationship. Whatever it is, you're going to get extremely clear on who that best self is. What are the thoughts that best self has? When you imagine that best self, what do you see? What are the qualities of this version of yourself? What inspires you to be that self? Why would you want to be that self? What are the benefits you get? You're going to be going into all these questions. Maybe the benefit is oh, I lost 20 pounds, I lost 50 pounds, I lost 100 pounds. That's only one benefit, though. You're going to look at all the other benefits, the health benefits, the reverberating benefits to those who you love that see that you're achieving your goal, that you're becoming healthier. So then there are the health benefits. You're going to live longer. A lot of times people come up with benefits like, oh, I can fit into clothes that I haven't fit into forever. I can feel less self-conscious. I can get into that bikini that I've wanted to get in. I can run down the beach and play in the water with my children. That's one that always sticks with me, that I've read on multiple occasions, that people who want to master losing weight have as a component a vision of their best self as this very unself-conscious being who's able to give of herself, himself, because she or he is not occupied by being worried about what you look like or what other people are thinking. So strategy number 3 will be to embody that best self. To when a negative emotion arises in your inner world, or a negative thought threatens to take you down into an old negative self cycle or an old self, you're going to be able to evoke that specifically defined best version of yourself that you can only evoke after you've defined it, and then you can only evoke after you've practiced it. So you're going to have ample opportunity, and challenges will take you through step by step how to do that. But that will be, I want to give you some light at the end of the tunnel here, because these first two strategies, they can take you a certain way towards your goal, but it is really the third strategy that takes a little bit of time and understanding of how your inner world operates, how we all as humans operate and change. You have to get practiced at not only understanding that, but at doing that, at making the changes, at observing how you change before you can define your best self and then invoke your best self at those moments when you are threatened to move into an old self. And so when you do that the first time, which you will have an opportunity to do in an upcoming challenge, you will see the power that you possess inside you to make these changes to your life, to become that version of yourself who you want to become. And just like the Dalai Lama, you can choose to infuse that best self with a sense of your highest values of your life. You know, the sense that you have that you want to be a loving human being, that you want to love yourself, when you can have that love for who you are and for the way that you are in the world, which really emits from a really conscious awareness and definition of who you want to be in the world. So when all that comes together, you see that you make a quantum leap from what perhaps was a person at the beginning of this My Master Health Challenge who wasn't really aware of the different things that are going on in your inner world to produce behaviors and produce bad habits and produce stress and weight gain and the inability to maintain weight loss. You're going to see that you now become so aware of the components that go into producing yourself that you have control that you never have before over your future. And you're realizing that each time that you take that control, you're taking a step towards creating a future that's different from your history and your past. And we know that because we know what the science says about making consistent habitual changes in your inner world. It says that that changes your brain, and a changed brain cells produce a changed experience. So when you take in information, your brain will process it differently in the future. And when it processes it differently, emotions that arise in your inner world are different emotions, and different emotions produce different behaviors. Different behaviors mean that your outer world results are different, right? Different behaviors, different eating behaviors produce different body, produce a different life. And so you'll be extremely empowered to do that. Let's take a minute right now. And if you're not on the call right now and you join it later, I've posted in Facebook the mistaken self diagram. And so I'm just going to walk through this. You can download it from there and walk through it with me right now. So this is the mistaken self, day 8. And this takes you through tracking a self cycle, right? And you're going to learn as we go. You're going to be exposed to a self-promoting cycle, which is a cycle that you intentionally cultivate to bring your best self to bear. And that is the opposite of a self-defeating cycle, which is one of these self cycles that devolves into those negative behaviors that throw you off of the path of moving towards your goal and sabotage your goal, right? So this is actually what occurs when you and yourself merge in your inner world and you fail to maintain that space. So I'll go through it step by step. There is a triggering event that occurs. Maybe it occurs in the outer world. And you know, one example I like to use for this as a practical example is as a happy couple. Let's see, you're walking through the park, you're having a perfectly nice day, and you see a happy couple. The reason I like this example is because a happy couple you wouldn't think would trigger a negative reaction. But you don't know, everybody has different associations built into their brain. So for you, a happy couple may provoke an old memory of when you used to be part of a happy couple. And all of a sudden that becomes a trigger event because you perceive yourself as no longer part of a happy couple, and that produces this emotion potentially of stress, right? So in this case, a happy event is misperceived because of old beliefs that your self is carrying around. And so, again, be very aware. It could be anything in the outer world. It could be a positive event. But what happens is you become a mistaken version of yourself in that moment. If your self misperceives a cue in the outer world, perceives it as somehow threatening, all of a sudden, that old self is going to be triggered with a sense of stress, a sense of anxiety. And this is because this is what your self historically is programmed to do. It is programmed to notice when there is something potentially threatening in your environment. And where we go wrong in our modern human psychology is that we are so overprogrammed to associate so many different things with a long history, a long memory of potential negative memories, that so many things that occur throughout the course of the day can lead down that track to a negative memory and create this mistaken self, right? You remember that old life that you used to have. And what happens? You start to go into some story. This is the third step of this mistaken self. Some old memory, some mistaken story of rapid thinking. You used to be happy. Why aren't you happy anymore? What's wrong? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my life? All of these thoughts that are so mistaken. They're so contrived. They're so made up, right? They only occur because you've been pulled into an old memory that has no real basis in reality. It's just a story that lives in the cells of your brain and body that you have managed to not observe, but to get pulled into. And when you get pulled into it, these mistaken beliefs become triggered about your lack of something. You're not good enough. And then what happens? The fourth step, an increase of stress follows, because this is an objectively non-threatening event. There's nothing you can do about an objectively non-threatening event, and that is extremely stressful. That provokes more and more thoughts, more and more stress. Unless you're able to pull back and see what's going on, you're going to get pulled into a whole cycle of story, of narrative, of thoughts. People don't like me. I'm not good enough. Whole history of why you were left maybe in a relationship. These are stressful thoughts and emotions that occur. And that's what happens. Emotion arises off of your bridge of translation, and it's most likely some form of anxiety, because it's always stress and anxiety are so intertwined. It's always some form of anxiety, and so often I've just gone through 5 steps, and that can happen in an instant if you're not great at noticing it, right? So while I'm breaking them down into steps, keep in mind that this can happen in your inner world in an instant. And that's why we have to go into such granular detail to tease them apart, to notice what the different components are, right? So those are 4 steps. Thoughts turn into emotions. Old stories get provoked. Everything. The genius of your mind, the downside of it, is that it can immediately move from a happy moment to one stimuli that comes in to a moment later a whole cycle of negative thinking, right? Negative emotional memories. This distortion that's occurring in your inner world right now is the 6th step. It distorts your ability to see and hear this unconscious story that's going on in your bridge, because you're clouded now. You're so clouded in your inner world that you can't maintain space to see, to observe, to notice, and to listen to your inner dialogue, to hear what's going on. Your capacity to make changes is totally compromised now. You don't have that separation in order to take steps. You can't even notice. So the irony here is that yourself, which was evolved to take care of you, is now working completely against you. It's actually perpetuating and accelerating the amount of stress that's going on in your inner world, and that, of course, we know is having a very negative health effect on you. Outside of the specific health goal that you are moving through the challenge to master, this stress experience is shortening your telomeres, right? And that is putting at risk the cells that need to replicate healthily in order for you to have a nice, healthy, long life. And so it's doing all kinds of negative things. There's all sorts of motivations that you should have to get this under control, to get that space back in and notice. what happens because of this if you don't notice it. This old self story, this old self system, this pattern is reinforced, and it's primed when it's reinforced to repeat again because it is contagious. It is repetitive. Those cells, this whole structure, this cell network that represents this particular narrative, this mistaken self, is reinforced. That river I talked about is actually broadened so that it's more likely to repeat. Water is more likely to flow down it next time. So what happens next? This damaged or partial or mistaken view of yourself, this story that you have, is projected out into the world. So other people observe your mistaken self, this unhealthy experience of yourself. We pick that up. Whether we know it or not, everyone is unconsciously hyper attuned to what's going on with the people around them. And so if you are caught in this unhealthy mistaken self cycle, people will respond to that. They will either, if they're healthy, push you away from them, or they will recognize that you're in an unhealthy place. And if they're not healthy, they may not recognize it, and they may get pulled into that unhealthy pattern themselves, right? They may get dragged into a story. They may get provoked into one of their own old unhealthy stories. So what happens then? Your expectation of the world is confirmed. The person either pushes you away, or they maybe meet you in this unhealthy pattern. And again, from the outside world, now you've pulled in a reinforcement of your old negative story. That unconscious pattern, this self cycle, is maintained in your life, and it's going to repeat again. And that's the sad history of these self cycles. However, if at that moment, what I call, and you're going to learn to call this week, your key moment, that moment when the emotion arises off your bridge of translation, and you notice that stress or anxiety, if you are able to be present at that moment, and you can notice it, and you can add the language and define what's occurring and why that's occurring, because you've managed to maintain some space between you and yourself, which you're getting better and better at with every day of practice, you are able to apply one of the three strategies that I talked about today. You can either notice it early enough that you can just watch it, observe and watch it until it dissolves. You can, if you're able to not notice it right away, but you can pull back in after it's gotten going a little bit and just say, okay, I see what's going on. I've lost this time, but I'm introducing a new scene to this movie, and that is that I notice what's going on, and let's let it play out, and next time it's going to be less likely to play out. And then strategy number 3, which you're going to be digging more deeply into towards the end of this week and this weekend, which is developing that best self so that you can use your key moment as an opportunity to shift, as a trigger, actually, that you will define in your inner world. Those negative key moments will become triggers that shift you into your best self, will transform yourself into the person that is your best self, that is aligned with your health goal, that always takes the right step to achieve your health goal. So you'll be able to put one of those strategies into place. If you're not able to do that, then symptoms accumulate inside you. Anxiety, depression, they increase, and you're less likely to take the steps that you need to take, like on a daily basis, doing your exercise, which I really encourage you to start building into your life. You saw today in day 8, if you got to that download, that there are all sorts of positive benefits to doing this exercise. It feeds your brain. It enables you to make changes so much faster. All of the reasons that are on top of the obvious health reasons and the burning calorie reasons and the feel-good reasons, right? All of the chemicals that doing exercise produces in your body to make you feel better. If you don't do those things, all of this negativity is reinforced, and you have to continue to live with it for longer. And what we're doing during this 21-day process is we're cutting the length of time that you need to live in these old negative self cycles so that you can consistently achieve that health goal. So that's it. That's it for today. I encourage you to really get on that exercise this week. We are 1 minute away. I haven't seen any questions in the Facebook group just now. You're going to be, as I said, this is the tough week, the middle week. A lot of times this is when people can fall off. So really encourage you to stay after it each morning. Each morning, notice that first thought of the day. If it's not where you want it to be, that's your opportunity. Make a change, shift it to the person that you want to be, and get up, do your Mind Master challenge for the day, do your day for the week, and then get on with your day. And you're going to notice each time that you do that, each day that you do it, you're building great habits. You're strengthening the positive habits in your inner world. So, good luck with this week. Keep up the comments in Facebook. I'll be in there every day. I'm practicing what I preach, achieving my goals each day right alongside you, and I'm having a great time doing it. I'll keep an eye out in Facebook, and I will see you again next Monday evening. Until then, have a great week.